Unfortunately, the majority of the estate went to payment of creditors, including the IRS.
So now his daughter is taking on a massive record label to make sure that she and the rest of his family are getting what they are owed.
Johnnie Taylor lived like a man racing the clock. On stage, he was velvet smooth, a voice that carried through juke joints and disco halls. But behind the music, the story got messy. The parties, the women, the kids scattered across states. He never slowed down, not even when the spotlight faded.
And you, this time we got a good love. This time.
His legacy isn't just the first million-selling disco anthem or the soul records that still spin today. It's the storm he left behind. From courtroom fights to royalty battles, Taylor's life proves that being a legend doesn't always mean living clean. It means living complicated and leaving questions behind.
He was a pimp at one time, and he was a con artist at one time, and then became a pop singer.
Johnnie Taylor wasn't just a smooth voice on the mic. He lived life at full speed, and it showed. People adored his music, but behind the stage lights, he was tangled up in heavy partying. Back then, a lot of artists dove headfirst into that scene, and Johnnie was right in the middle of it. The drinks, the drugs, the late nights, it all caught up with him. At one point, he even landed behind bars after getting busted with more than just a little trouble in his pockets. The chaos didn't really stop as he got older either. Even when he stood in front of cameras telling kids to stay clean, his own battles were still raging behind closed doors. His body had already taken a beating, and his kids later admitted they watched him push himself too far, sometimes not even sleeping for days. And if the drugs weren't enough drama, his love life added another layer. Johnnie was never shy about his thing for women, and he fathered kids with several different partners over the years. He made no secret of it either, almost like it was just part of his story. Johnnie's family tree was messy and loud, just like his life. He had more than 10 kids, but he only spoke about a handful in public. From Kansas City to Chicago to marriages that came and went, his children were scattered, and he tried pulling them together under one roof of love. The effort was there, but it didn't always land. Some of them felt he wasn't really around when it mattered, and that left scars that didn't fade. After he passed, new kids came forward who had never been acknowledged, and the whole thing sparked arguments and heartbreak. For some, it was less about fame and more about wanting to be recognized by the man who created them. In the middle of all this, his career hit an insane high with that one disco anthem that had everybody moving. It was the first track ever to sell on such a massive scale, and it locked him in as a legend. Years later, his last release sounded almost like a goodbye, talking about joining other soul greats in the afterlife. People close to him whispered that he might have felt his time was running out. Not long after, he was gone. The official word was a heart attack, but whispers of something darker followed him into death, leaving fans and family debating what really happened.
Johnnie Taylor died without a will, and as such, there was no way for him to designate who would administer his estate at his death.
Right after Johnnie passed in Texas, the ripple hit all the way over in North Carolina. A woman named Fonda Bryant picked up a call that flipped her whole world. She wasn't ready for it, didn't see it coming, but suddenly her late mother's past was sitting right in her lap. Peggy, her mom, had known Johnnie decades earlier, and hearing about his death lit something inside her. She pushed Fonda to step up and claim her place, to finally make her voice count. The story traced back to when Peggy was just a teenager sneaking into a gospel show in Gastonia. That's where she first crossed paths with a young, magnetic Johnnie, freshly singing with the Soul Stirrers. One quick connection, and that chapter closed, only to resurface years later in a way no one expected. For Fonda, it was complicated. She had barely known this man, but his absence had been a shadow over her whole life. She remembered hustling as a kid, working early, figuring things out without the kind of guidance she wished she had. She always wondered how different things might have been if she'd had his support. Maybe school would have gone smoother. Maybe opportunities would have opened wider. It took her years to even think about reaching out, but her mother never let the idea go. Peggy kept telling her this was her chance, and eventually Fonda gave in. Nervous, unsure, but willing to see where it led. That choice ended up changing everything. Fonda finally decided she wasn't going to sit quiet anymore. She linked up with a lawyer in Dallas, laid out her story, and asked him to help put her name in the mix. This wasn't just about clout. It was about being acknowledged and getting the same respect as the rest of Johnny's kids. The lawyer went ahead and filed the paperwork, and just like that, the conversation shifted. People who once brushed her off suddenly had to pay attention. Once her name was in the system, Fonda started asking the bigger questions. Where was the money? Why weren't things adding up? The moment her claim hit the news, the Taylor family was thrown into chaos. 6 kids were already on record, and now here came Fonda shaking the table. Shock, arguments, side eyes. Everyone wanted to know the truth, and Fonda stood right in the middle of the storm.
When this man ups and passes away, all of a sudden you want to come forth and say, this is my father?
When the courtroom showdown came around, Fonda walked in ready to claim her spot, but then she noticed a man sitting nearby who didn't look like some random face in the crowd. Turns out she wasn't the only one chasing answers. His name was Tyrone TJ Hooker, and he said he was Johnny's son too. TJ's story hit different. Unlike Fonda, he actually knew Johnny. He'd been mentored by him and had even crossed paths with some of the family before. Johnny Jr. remembered meeting him back in the day, which gave TJ a little more weight in the room. Once Fonda and TJ locked eyes, they knew they had the same mission. Instead of being rivals, they teamed up, figuring they'd be stronger together. And then, another twist dropped. A woman named Chiffon Brown stepped forward, saying she was also one of Johnny's children. Her proof? His name sat right there on her birth certificate. She'd grown up with only album covers to connect her to him, staring at pictures of a father she never got to meet. She never heard his voice off a record, never got that real-life bond. Now it wasn't just Fonda making waves. It was Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon, all claiming their place. Meanwhile, the 6 kids everyone already knew about were caught off guard, trying to process the fact that their circle suddenly got bigger. With family ties and money on the line, emotions were running high. Instead of splitting apart, the 3 newcomers decided to stick together. They were determined to stand side by side in the fight. Behind the scenes, their lawyer kept digging, and his search pulled someone else into the spotlight. Johnny's second wife, Jerlene, who still had a big role to play in how it all unfolded. Jerlene had been Johnny's wife for years, and together they had Latasha and Jonathan. But the marriage fell apart right before he passed, and their divorce papers said she was supposed to walk away with half of everything. The problem? The estate couldn't move until the court decided who actually counted as his kids. That meant DNA tests for Fonda, TJ, and Chiffon. Jerlene wasn't about to let control slip away. She linked up with Sabrina, one of Johnny's older daughters, and together they tried to keep the new claims from sticking. Some of the siblings argued that since Johnny never went public about Fonda, TJ, or Chiffon, they didn't deserve a piece. After all the courtroom battles and legal bills, the payout was a disappointment. 9 children ended up splitting what was left, and it wasn't much, barely enough to cover anything. The real money came in trickles through royalty checks that showed up twice a year. Some were laughably small, others hit in the thousands, but it was never steady. For Fonda, it wasn't about the dollar signs alone. The fight gave her grit and pushed her to be a stronger parent for her own son. Still, she didn't stop pressing. She turned her focus to the royalties, convinced the music was still bringing in way more than what the family saw. She kept reaching out to Sony, asking where the money was going, but the silence dragged on. The longer it went, the more frustrated she became, wondering how her father's legacy could be so rich, yet leave his family with so little.
So now his daughter is taking on a massive record label to make sure that she and the rest of his family are getting what they are owed.
By the time 2020 rolled around, Fonda Bryant had completely lost trust in Sony. What pushed her over the edge was watching the label brag about dropping $100 million on social justice causes. To her, it felt like a PR stunt, not the real thing. She fired off a letter to one of their execs, basically calling them out. If they wanted to support justice, they needed to start by paying the Black artists and families whose work built their empire. She didn't let up. Email after email, she kept pressing until finally someone at Sony cracked. They agreed to clear a $72,000 debt from her father's account and threw in a one-time $97,000 payment for all 9 of his kids to split. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something. For Fonda, it was proof that refusing to stay quiet worked. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the payout only happened because the company was under the spotlight after George Floyd's death. She felt they moved out of guilt, not fairness. And the bigger frustration? Sony refused to hand over the paperwork showing what Johnnie had supposedly borrowed, leaving her and her siblings in the dark. Lawyers said it was standard if the estate didn't have a clear manager, but to Fonda, it just felt like another wall shutting her out. Even 2 of Johnnie's other kids admitted they'd never seen a single page of proof either.